It's less about the number of messages that go out and more about how effective those messages are. But at the same time, you do kind of need to understand, you know, based on past data, how many interactions does a customer need in order to actually convert or take an action? So, welcome back to Work Association. I'm Nick.
I'm Miles.
Work Association is a podcast that we just started where we think about a word, do some research on it, and basically kind of come up with a story around something really interesting that has to do with design, technology, and digital experience. This week, we're taking a look at the word that Miles gave me, which is trigger. So, Miles, I know at the end of this, when I kind of go through what I found, you're going to give me your sense of what that word means or why you picked it. So, for anybody listening right now, stay tuned, pay attention to the whole story, and you'll hear what was behind that. But yeah, before we get started, I think it would just be kind of interesting to hear what you think I'm gonna talk about next, based on where I went in the last episode. I gave you my first initial reactions of what the word trigger means to me. So just based on that, just based on what I was saying last time, what do you think I'm gonna talk about?
Oh, good question. I think you're gonna go down marketing automation, uh, just because that's what we think about every day. So I think that's my bet. But knowing us, we make connections with the most random things. So who knows? You can go down the path of branding. Yeah, but my hunch is you're gonna go in the automation side of things. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's where I'm
that's
at.
not too far off. So I think we can just go ahead and get started. So you're right. Like, obviously, based on what I was alluding to in the last episode, I immediately went to thinking about marketing automation. And so, first thing I'll do is kind of uh, define trigger marketing. So, when it comes to marketing automation, for anybody who doesn't know that much about it, it's essentially using technology to automate certain processes within marketing. And it usually has most to do with content marketing, sending email for, like taking new leads and nurturing them through a funnel and that whole kind of thing, or kind of assessing people's behavior and using that to personalize marketing. And so that's kind of what we're thinking about here. So trigger marketing is essentially using marketing automation software to perform a task as the result of an event, like an action taken by a prospect or a customer. So that definition comes from HubSpot. Triggers can
Hmm.
be anything that's measurable from a CRM and automation software. So if somebody fills out a form, if they open up an email, if they visit a certain number of pages on your website, if they use the chat feature on your site, if they visit a very specific page, any sort of like descriptive criteria about a customer can then be used, and the behaviors that they take on your site can then be used as a trigger to uh, make something happen, right? So in the case of like email marketing, if somebody opens up a specific email, then that might be used to trigger adding that user to a specific email list that are going to receive, a certain newsletter or a certain drip campaign of emails. It could potentially be used to determine whether or not a customer is ready for a sales call. So if you are the type of business that has sales reps, maybe you're like a B2B firm, and a customer takes certain actions on your website, that might signal that they're in the phase of their buyer journey, that they're ready to talk to an actual an actual sales rep. So that trigger would move that particular lead over to have a new lead owner of a particular sales rep, and then that person can now email them or call them or whatever. But also, triggers could be used for other things, such as uh, you know serving up dynamic content, and that's really kind of where things are going to
Hmm,
go in terms of what we're going to focus on next.
that's awesome. I wonder. So with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
So I wonder, like, there must be some limits to this, where you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to create triggers for every little thing, right? Um, and when you're talking about, let's stick with like email. Uh, do you have any sense of at what point does it get too obtrusive, or like it's too you're being too aggressive with it? Because this is a really great tactic, right? It's a really great way to reach out to people and connect with people.
Hmm.
And especially like, oh, I see you visit our website, or you kind of like abandoned cart is a kind of a good experience, where you follow up with them and things like that. Um, what have you seen out there that, is a good example of a successful kind of like trigger based marketing
Hmm.
versus like a bad one, or kind of a, yeah, just like a negative impact?
Yeah. So um, the use of triggers and what actually happens when a trigger is pulled are, I think, probably two different things, right? So the more like detailed you make your criteria for triggers, the better. So you know essentially what you're doing is understanding the behaviors of your customer and using those behaviors as signals for taking specific actions. So I don't necessarily think that using too many triggers tends to be the problem. I think the problem is either not understanding your customer enough and not doing enough to segment your customer,
Yep.
your customer base, um, or sending too many messages. I think a lot of
Yeah.
times businesses will they'll have like one buying signal as a trigger, and then they'll drop a customer into an email marketing series of 20 messages where they get a new email every 2 days or something like that. And you kind of need to know where are the limits of like, is a customer interested anymore? Like if they've been sent 4, 5, 6 emails and they're just not responding, um, a potentially the content you're using is not quite there and it's not resonating with the customer, which means that maybe you got to think about who your persona is in the first place. What kind of like um, criteria are you using to like understand that customer's needs and understand how to communicate to that customer, and then also like you know what are you using as your triggers, because you could be using a trigger that you might think is a clear signal of purchase behavior or something, but it turns out that no, actually, that customer is not ready to talk to a salesperson. They're not ready to purchase right now. They're still just looking, or whatever it might be. Um, so I think it's all about like, yeah, finding the right criteria, the right sort of like, um, you know, state of being that potential user is in, to understand when are they ready for the next message and what should that message be based on the actions that they've taken and who they are as a customer and their personality and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think like what I've seen in the past too is people tend to set and forget it kind of mentality with triggers because they have a lot of other things going on. And kind of to your point, this should be an ongoing refinement and like an ongoing type of experiment where you're constantly adjusting your trigger, based on the feedback that you're getting, It should constantly be evolving over time as you're getting more data. Because, yeah, I think, you know, by bombarding them with messages, that's not going to work, right? So I think there's definitely it's a very active role when
Hmm.
you're creating triggers and things like that. And I feel like people need to be, yeah, constantly evaluating it, looking at the data, just to see how effective things are. It's definitely not a static type of exercise.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I think like one other thing, um, which is kind of a good segue into what we're going to talk about next. One other thing to keep in mind is again, you know, it's less about the number of messages that go out and more about uh, how effective those messages are. But at the same time, you do kind of need to understand, you know, based on past data, how many interactions does a customer need in order, like on average, in order to actually convert or take an action? So, you know, if you are currently running a bunch of marketing campaigns and it's taking, you know, 21 interactions between, you know, receiving emails and the sales calls and all that other stuff, if it's taking that long to get a customer to the point where they're actually going to purchase, you know, is that what you want? Do you want that to be shorter? Do you want it to be, you know, easier for the customer? And if that's the case, like what can you look at in your actual communications that provide the customer with a better understanding of what you do, some reasoning behind, you know, your value proposition and why it makes sense for them, a better understanding of how, you know, it kind of your service offering or your product impacts their life positively and fits into their life in a positive way. If you can deliver that information quicker, you know, it might speed up that you know or reduce the number of interactions that your company needs to have with a customer before they actually purchase. But one thing that really helps, or one thing that is, you know, that is very clearly a great use of trigger marketing is using triggers to display dynamic content.
Hmm.
So dynamic content, first and foremost, is essentially um, areas of, you know, a digital experience that can actually be tapped into your customer relationship management software, your CRM, and um, you know, use information about the customer to serve them a unique dynamic experience. So I can kind of break that down further. If somebody fills out a form on your website and they put in their first and last name, their email address, you know, whatever else, and that data is stored in your CRM, and you're sending emails through, you know, a marketing automation software, you can then personalize that email with their first name. So, you know, instead of saying just high valued customer, it would say, "Hi, Nick." And then you can, you know, have the email feel much more personalized. But, you know, that's something I think most people know about when it comes to, you know, email marketing. Dynamic content on a website, however, can use that same information, that same data to actually change the design of the website. So if you are a customer that filled out a form um, to, you know, download a particular piece of free content, you know, maybe there was like a blog post that linked to a white paper or something like that. You fill out that form once, but then, you know, 2 or 3 weeks later, you want to download a different PDF or a different, you know, piece of content. Why should you have to fill out that form again? You know, there are systems where those form fields, like it recognizes, the website recognizes that you visited the site before. It knows who, you know, you are basically from a cookie, in your browser, and then it can pre-fill that form with those fields, or it just doesn't even have to display the form, and you can just download the file, and it'll still register in the CRM that you've downloaded that file. And then you downloading that file could be a further trigger for other dynamic content. Say, for example, there's a section on the website with a featured product. If you've already purchased that featured product before, maybe the next time you visit the website, you are uh, shown a different featured product. So we just started working with a company that sells outdoor equipment. So like kayaks and um, whitewater rafting supplies and things like that. If you just bought a kayak, but you didn't purchase a life vest, or you didn't purchase a paddle, um, not only are there ways to then send an email to that customer saying, hey, you made this purchase, that was the trigger, right? You made this purchase of a kayak, how about a life vest and a paddle? But you can also then have it be that the next time the customer comes to the website, the first thing they see is a life vest and a paddle as like the featured kind of content of the homepage, or the featured product on the homepage.
That's awesome. It really makes me think of, you know, with all of these new web technologies, we are moving towards smart websites, essentially, and smart experiences, right? So we talk a lot about designing user experiences by, reducing friction, and we talk about having great user experience as in just the overall look and feel of the website is great. But now that's becoming kind of the standard and the starting point. And I think as we move on into the future and we have these smarter triggers, like informing us on how the website should look and feel on a hyper personalized level, I think we're going to start getting into smart experiences. And this is something we're already kind of doing in our agency. But what's really awesome about that is that these websites are aware, which puts the user at a kind of like a state of ease, because everything is kind of within reach. There's better recommendations happening on the site. You're not seeing content that you don't want to look at. I mean, we always kind of tell our clients that websites shouldn't have long running text, right? Like walls of text. But I actually know some people who prefer that, right? Like technical people, people who are doing due diligence. Let's say it's a legal website. They love to read tons of paragraphs. So maybe for them, that's a validation. For others, it's not. So if you can segment your users, present them different experiences, you can capture your target audience in a really hyper personalized way and eventually converting them. But more importantly, you're being more helpful as a site or a product, a company, organization. You're just being more helpful by having better recommendations.
Yeah. And ultimately, what this really says is that a website is a piece of software, it's a tool that is made for not only transactions, like obviously with e-commerce, you're selling products. With a B2B company's website or a SaaS company's website, you have this service, or you have this software as a service that you are trying to sell. You might need to get somebody in touch with a sales rep, or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, there's two sides on either side. There's two like human entities on either side of this website. There's the customer or the audience, and then on the other side of the internet is the client brand, right? Like your company's brand, and your company's brand is in many ways, like we always talk about, making a brand sort of look and feel and have the personality of a human, like to make it very easy for communication, two-way communication with a company through the website, through a digital experience, by making sure that you understand the customer or the audience's goals, challenges, frustrations, and motivations. But then on the other side, like understanding yourself, as a business, your own brand. What are your sort of ways that you can help that customer solve a problem or a challenge, address a fear, help them reach a goal, whether that's losing weight by exercising more and buying your exercise equipment, or offering a business a service that's going to help them reduce costs or whatever it might be. It's all
Yep.
about these sort of like fundamental human issues that manifest in different ways, and being able to use your website to communicate that you understand the challenges and the motivations and frustrations and goals of the audience that's coming to your site, and that you have specific ways of dealing with those things in a way that feels human, in a way that feels personal, in a way that feels emotional. And so when you're talking about, using these types of triggers to make that come alive, there's really two areas, right? We've already started talking about one, but
Mm-hmm.
there's two areas that you think about. One is personalization, and personalization really is at the heart of trigger marketing. It's being able to kind of understand who the customer is and then serve them something that feels personalized to them, whether that's a specific type of content on a web page, or addressing them directly via an email, or whatever it might be, using conversational UI on the website. Any of those things to make it feel like, and validate who the customer is, who the audience is, and what they're going through and what their needs are. um, but there's also another side to it, which is something called humanization.
Mm.
And what human is. So I read an article by Jay Baer from Convince and Convert, and what he said was, done well, humanization makes you want to support a brand because you feel like you know and trust the people behind the logo.
Mm.
And the big difference between uh, something like personalization and something like humanization is that trigger marketing utilizes information about a customer to personalize, through dynamic content, what it is that they see and interact with as part of the organization. So, for one example, a way that personalization could be used on a website, one really great example is Coca-Cola has this campaign called Share a Coke, where in stores you can go out and buy a 6 pack of Coke, and it's got like different people's names on it, and it just it might say like sister or Anthony
Right.
or whatever. And it's just kind of random, right? You just sort of pick up what you pick up, and you might grab like a 12-ounce bottle out of a cold case, and, see someone's name and be like, oh, I know somebody that is named that. I'll give this Coke to them or whatever. But they actually have a website where you can now go in and, kind of like a Vistaprint model, you type in text to personalize the product, so that way you can share a Coke with your friends or your family that has a little message. So like, it could say like, to dad, love Nick, because my dad really loves Coke or something like that. I could send him a 6 pack, and it'll be custom printed with his information and my little message on every bottle. And he can kind of just like, yeah, it allows you to kind of make these human connections through personalization. I'm sure that they then also take that data and use it to learn about their customers. And the other thing is that, like, as you type, obviously there's an image of a Coke bottle with like a blank label, and as you type like in the Coke font, you see like whatever message you're putting in there,
That's
and
awesome.
you can preview
Yeah.
it. Yeah, you could preview it before you actually purchase and everything. So that's like kind of like the content changing as you're interacting with the site, and that's really cool, right? That's personalized. Um, but I was talking a little bit about how we often approach branding from the perspective of making it like as this monolithic identity, anthropomorphized as a human. Like, what is the personality of the brand? What are their likes and dislikes? How do they interact and talk, with a particular brand voice as this monolithic structure to the customer, so it sounds and feels cohesive across the board. But at the end of the day, what humanization really kind of acknowledges is that a company is not a logo; it's a collection of people that are working towards a common goal. And whether
Oh,
that's actually selling a product or it's a nonprofit with a specific mission, everybody's got their role to play, everybody's got their job to do towards whatever that mission is. And when you humanize something, you're starting to inject storytelling about the people in your company as part of your marketing
okay.
efforts. Yeah.
So it's not necessarily like here's Bob, which is what we're gonna call our company. He shops at these stores, and this is the persona of our business. It's
Hmm.
starting to become more like this is the organization, and these are the stories about the people behind it and the products behind it, and it's almost like a collection of stories. Is that kind of like where you're going with the fact that it's not really just a monolithic type of like visual, I guess, or
Right.
yeah, like
Yeah.
way of looking at it, that it's a little bit deeper and broader than that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, on one hand, you have your brand identity, which has a set of common goals and
Uh-huh.
values. It's got a visual identity that's associated to it, right? But, at the same time, there are people that are part of the company, and connecting with those people is often the way that humans kind of respond to a business best. So, if we think about a company like Best Buy has a very sort of strong brand identity. When you're talking to someone from Best Buy because they're wearing a blue shirt, right? And
Yep. Yeah, don't ever wear a blue shirt at Best Buy because
yeah,
people will go up to you.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But the thing is that, like, if you are sort of explaining to your, if Best Buy is talking to their team and they're instilling like these core values of what being a team member of Best Buy is all about, and like they kind of make this messaging super cohesive. On one hand, it makes it so that way any customer has the same sort of you know ex- experience, whether they deal with a customer service representative or a salesperson, whether they're in a store in Kansas or in a store in New Jersey, right? Because they can immediately gravitate towards, okay, I'm seeing this person with a blue shirt on, they're super helpful. There's kind of like that foundational level of values and mission that's behind that interaction. But at the same time, each person is going to be slightly different. They're going to talk slightly differently. They're going to have their own opinions and views. And like what humanization is really kind of pointing at is um, both acknowledging that everyone's different and kind of using that to your advantage. And then also in your marketing, talking about, you know, uh, who the people are behind the business. And so, like, for example, there's a company that produces a particular product that you really love. Let's say you're really into uh, I don't know, fly fishing, or you're really into cooking, right? And there's this company that
Sure.
makes cutting boards,
Okay.
or they if it's the fly fishing example, I guess it'd be like a company that makes fishing poles. But I like I like cooking, so I'm gonna stick.
Let's
I'm
go
gonna
with
stick
cooking.
to yeah. I'm gonna stick with the cutting boards example. So let's say there's this company that makes really awesome cutting boards, and one of the kind of biggest value propositions of this cutting board company is that all of their products are handmade. Well, it just stands to reason that if you tell a story about, well, who is it? Who are the hands that are making these cutting boards? And
Huh.
using that as part of your marketing, it provides an emotional human connection to the artisans that are making that product, and it makes it much more sort of attractive to purchase that product because you see the care and attention to detail that went into making it, right? And so if you are a business that is in that kind of space, you can, not just have this monolithic approach to, we at Cutting Board Company X produce cutting boards through this time honored tradition of, handmade whatever, you're kind of saying like, no, this is Max. He's the guy that does all the sanding, and here's what he likes to do. And like, what maybe for this cutting board company in particular, it's like, well, what do you like to cook? Or it's, it could even be like not really talking about, the things that they do outside of work, but just what does craftsmanship mean to them, and why do they take pride in, their work as somebody who helps to make these cutting boards or whatever it might be. You can then use that on your website, use it on, video material. You can have it in your email marketing and things like that, and it kind of like is an added bonus to the sort of value that you bring of this cutting board being a tool, but also it's an aesthetic piece of your kitchen and your lifestyle. It's made of a particular type of wood that is either, let's say, really rare, or maybe it's super durable, or maybe it's super eco-friendly or whatever. You've got all those value propositions. Well, the people behind the product are now a value proposition as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's also a great tool to come up with a really, enticing narrative. Because oftentimes, especially us, like being a bunch of brand nerds, we'll always be like, what's the story you're trying to tell? What's the story you're trying to tell? People don't know. They know that they make great products, and that's why they hired us. So, and then, I feel like by looking inwards, you can find interesting people within your organization. You could talk to them, right? And then tell their story. And to your point, that's kind of the value proposition, especially right now with everything digital. Obviously, this is being recorded during the pandemic. That human connection is more important now than ever.
Yeah.
And this is a really great way to present your brand, present your organization, and remind people that there are people behind it. You're not just going on a landing page, you're not just arriving at an e-commerce store and buying something and leaving. You're going into this space that people created and put a lot of work and effort into. That people like really cared about it, and yeah, that there's just humans on the other side. That alone, is a really great story to tell. And that's something that is an incredible value proposition and a way to build up brand affinity over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, this really circles back around to how is this related to trigger marketing? Um,
We kind of went,
which, well, ultimately, like humanization is not something that is specifically related to marketing automation, digital marketing, even. I mean, I don't know if you remember back in like maybe the late 90s, early 2000s, there were a bunch of commercials that were made for Honey Bunches of Oats cereal.
all
And,
right,
you
yeah.
go into the factory and there's that one woman who was super passionate about her job, and she ended up becoming like, kind of a spokesperson for Honey Nut, uh, or Honey Bunches of Oats, I should say. And I mean, the same thing kind of happened with, I believe it was H&R Block, that one guy who like wore the bow tie, and that he was like
Yep, yep.
he was in a Super Bowl ad, I think, at some point, right? I need to look up what his name was really quickly. Let me just look it up super quick, super quick. Was it H&R Block? Um,
I just, I just Googled H&R Block guy.
yeah, H&R Block bow tie
Rich,
guy is what I
Richard
just saw.
Gartland.
Yeah, Richard Gartland. So Richard Gartland, he started off as just one of H&R Block's, uh, you know, tax advisors or preparers, tax prep dudes, um, and you know, it was essentially just like a commercial that was, kind of a documentary style, like talking about, what he does. And then it turns into this whole thing with now he's got tax tips, and he's been in multiple commercials. He was, in a Super Bowl ad for H&R Block. So the humanization piece really works, and it's worked for a while, and it's worked outside of marketing automation. But now thinking about that, how can we apply that to marketing automation and using a trigger to serve up someone content that's not only personalized but also humanized? Because
Mm,
at the end of the
yes.
day, what humanization does is it builds these trust bridges. According to Jay Baer from Convince and Convert, again, I was like reading that article. It builds these trust bridges, emphasizing that the brand isn't a robot. It's real people with real personalities, and it does a lot more than just like the establishment of a brand persona, right? So if you have a customer goes on your website, takes an action like they, fill out a form to receive your email newsletter, and then after that, they engage with specific content on your site. You can then use that as an opportunity to serve them up dynamic content that has been personalized to their needs and their interests, but also talks about the human aspects of your brand. Gives them a particular human profile for maybe they get paired up with a sales rep. Humanize the content that comes out of that sales rep's email account, right? If it's going to go into a drip campaign that looks like it's coming from a particular sales rep, and that sales rep is going to be the person that's going to be talking to that customer, make it really clear who that person is, what they're like. Similarly, maybe you have customer testimonials. Use a marketing automation, behavior trigger to serve up a customer testimonial that matches your customer's profile. Maybe for a particular feature, there might be a testimonial. Let's say like you have a SaaS company. There might be a testimonial that talks about a specific feature in your app. After you learn that, a new user on your website is showing interest in that particular feature, or maybe they fit a particular user persona or whatever it is, serve up content that is humanized when you're serving up your dynamic content. And I think that that's really
Yeah.
kind of like something that I've never really thought about. That's a little bit more powerful than just straight up personalization. Because again, like I think people are just used to getting emails that have their first name in them nowadays. It's not enough to just say hi Nick when you're sending me an email. It's a lot better if you can demonstrate that you understand what my needs are, what my personality is like, and you can demonstrate that your company has people in it that think and look like me, and are able to, you know, understand my specific fears and challenges and motivations because they have the same fears and challenges and motivations, and they have this expertise of making a particular product, making that cutting board or producing that piece of software. They really understand, the challenges that you're going through, that I'm going through, and how to solve those things. And that can be incredibly powerful and impactful for any company that is using digital experiences and marketing triggers as part of their overall marketing plan.
I think the one other thought that I had was, how do we make this not creepy, right? Especially if you have a bunch of triggers. Over time, as you're analyzing and optimizing it, it starts to get really smart and very precise. And especially now where people are creeped out of like, oh my God, Instagram's listening to me, or like, this and that are happening. And the apps are getting smarter and smarter in terms of its recommendation engines. You know, um, what are some ways that people could be thinking about to not make it creepy, to make it helpful rather than obtrusive? The common
Yeah.
fears that people living in today's world have.
Yeah, actually, I think humanization is almost, I don't want to call it a panacea, like it's not going to fix everything, right? But I almost kind of think that
Kind of fixes it. Yeah.
humanization is the thing that fixes it. It's the path forward for making personalization not feel dumb and not feel creepy. it feels like, okay, like it's okay that that this company knows this information about me because A, I gave them the information, and then B, there's someone on the other side, a real person that really gets me, or that I can relate with. And it doesn't feel like this big corporation that's just out there to take my money. It's this one person that I'm dealing with that is a really nice guy or a really nice
Right.
girl or
I think where
whatever.
I think where the fear comes in is that there's a massive corporation with an AI, and this
Yeah,
robot just knows everything about me, and they're selling my information to the Russians. It's like, what?
right.
There's like very unfounded fears that comes out of that. But to your point, yeah, with humanization, it's all good because I've met this person before. It's not a stranger anymore.
Yeah,
I think that's the big leap that people have to do, is that to make sure that a stranger is not just, it's creepy when a stranger comes up to you and goes, "Hey, I heard you like cutting boards." Not creepy if someone comes up to you and introduces themselves, you get to learn about them, and then you find out that they make cutting boards
yeah,
and that they have the solutions to your problems. Because yeah, there is a process. I think oftentimes when it becomes a negative is when companies just use all of the available technologies at their disposal and just do like implement all of it without doing the groundwork of getting to know a person, nurturing the lead, and things like that.
yeah, absolutely. So there's this company called Drift, which is essentially, a almost like a CRM type of product, but it's all based around um, a chat system. And in fact, like when you are even going on their website as a company that might buy their you know their tool, uh, when you go to their site and you check out their pricing page, something that's a little bit of a piece of friction for me is that you can't actually see what their pricing is on that pricing page, but you can click to sign up for a free account, or you can get more details for like a premium or enterprise level account. But when you click get more details, it opens up a chat, and you're right off to immediately getting brought to a an actual person. It's not really conversational UI in that it's not like you're interacting with the website in a conversational way and the website is talking back to you in a conversational way. It's an actual conversation. So they take the time to ask you questions, learn about you, and then they give you the right information for your company based on how big it is, how many customers you have, those kinds of things. And you can see what features are in premium, right? Like I'm looking at this
Hmm.
webpage right now. The free version gives you just a live chat, so you can connect with your website visitors in real time with one-to-one conversations. But then the premium version, you can have custom chat bots, you can have intel and lead routing to different salespeople, and you know um, a connection with uh, a connection with Zoom, so that way you can take chats over to a video chat. So all of those things, you can see what features you get, but then the pricing is really based on how big your company is. And so it just makes the most sense to take it right to the human interaction to give you the right information for your company, so it makes it super simple and super easy for you to understand. And I think that like you know that type of interaction with like using a website to get to real humans, is a huge step forward. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with like having a trigger, although obviously if somebody connects with you via chat and then they use the chatbot and answer certain questions, you understand, you like learn things about that customer, so you can use that to deliver dynamic content and deliver emails in the future. And you can also potentially use any of the information you get out of that chat session to further make that pathway smarter, and deliver them you know more content that is better and better, and smarter in relation to what you're looking for. So yeah, the the tools that are out there for making your digital experiences more human and actually having it be connected to a real person on the other side, they're there, and it's fascinating to see how they're being used.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that's how I was able to learn something really cool about kind of the future of using trigger marketing and automation to make things, through technology, make things not only look and feel more human, but actually
Yes.
be more human.
Yeah, yeah. That's super fascinating. I think us just going down the rabbit hole of humanization is kind of energized me and definitely changed my perspective on brands and how we deal with brands and how you look at brands, because now that we have the tools, now that people's behaviors online are kind of shifting and evolving over time, I think, yeah, humanization is kind of the future, especially with like, hyper personalization and all that. Um, and yeah, in a way, we're kind of returning to what it feels like when you walk into like a department store and there's someone that greets you and there's like a person there.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So we've
Yep.
come a long way, and now we're back to that. So there you
Well,
go.
I mean, it's particularly appropriate, I think, right now because, I mean, like you said before, we're in the middle of the pandemic. Obviously, retail is always going to be an experience that people are going to want to have, and if anything, maybe the pandemic is going to make people long to actually be in a real store. But it's also shown that more and more sales activity is just going right to online. The
Yep.
growth of e-commerce right now is huge, and so you're getting to the point where, yeah, literally, the web is the new department store, and they're the big giant kind of e-commerce retailers are like the Macy's of the internet, but just 5 million times bigger. But then there's also like those sort of boutique shops and stuff too, and generally you're kind of going to expect that you go to those boutique shops and there's going to be someone behind the counter that's going to take a bunch of time, answer all your questions, make sure that you're comfortable with the product, really like you know really like make sure that you're making the right decision and helping you and guiding you through the purchase process and stuff. And you don't really see that a whole lot yet on e-commerce stores online, but it's coming, and there's a couple of e-commerce stores that do it really well already. So Charlotte's Web, the CBD brand, for example, amazing customer service and
Mm,
amazing sort of sales experience using their chat system.
yep.
Um, and like when you talk to people through that chat, um, they're very real, they're very casual, they're very personal, and it makes you feel at ease, and it makes you feel like they get what you're looking for, and they're out to genuinely help you and stuff. And I think that's kind of the direction that sales should go, is just allowing for the sales experience that you would want in person to happen, but just online, because people are going to be a lot less likely to actually be in person, probably for a while.
Yeah. Awesome.
So, Miles, that was what I thought about when I thought about Trigger.
That was not what I thought about, but I'm happy that you thought about it that way. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so to me, when I brought up the word trigger, it was really because that's what this show is centered around, right? Like trigger words. And in design, typically what we do is we have these words that are quote unquote the triggers, and that's what inspires us to draw and create different types of visuals. It's what inspires us to tell different types of stories. It's just basically like a jumping off point or a springboard for
Yeah.
us. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I was thinking about, and especially with like the idea of this podcast, I thought it would be appropriate to uh, you know, see how the trigger of trigger, like what that triggers, basically. So it's super meta, but it kind of worked, and yeah, I learned a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, good
Well,
stuff.
it's interesting because I also think that, the way that you're thinking about, what a trigger is for like a design, you know, um,
Context,
yeah, exactly. If we're thinking about what are the two or three different words that we associate to a brand, and like what does that make us think of, and that becomes the trigger for a visual direction where we're going to show like a whole bunch of mood boards and like logo
right,
options that
right.
relate to this brand and one specific word or meaning, right?
Hmm.
That's kind of how trigger marketing with personalization and humanization works, is like once you have a solid piece of information, this customer is interested in this particular product, or this customer is having this particular challenge or this particular problem. This customer is, fits this customer persona, and these are their goals, challenges, frustrations, and motivations. That bit of information is the jumping off point where you feel like you understand what to say next, and these are all the different, things that you want to put in front of that audience, that customer, to help them make a decision, to help them feel comfortable, with moving forward with your service or whatever it might be. I think those two things really are like pretty similar. Although, yeah, you were definitely thinking of it from a different perspective.
They're associated. They're
Yeah,
work associated. So there
definitely.
you go.
Yeah. So, um, in my research, because obviously like the next step now, right, is we learned all about how marketing triggers relate to personalization and humanization. I went down this whole rabbit hole and learned a bunch. I'm glad that I was able to you know tell you my little story and have you feel like you learned a bunch too. But going through this process and learning about uh, humanization and personalization and marketing triggers brought me to a couple of different words that
Oh, okay,
I might be interested in giving you for your little challenge. So I had a few, but ultimately I narrowed it down to one.
good.
And the next step, yeah, would be for you to um, get into learning about this word and thinking about what it means to you, uh, and going down your own little rabbit hole. So, Miles, you ready for your word?
I'm excited.
All
Let's
right.
hear it.
The word is attraction.
Attraction.
Yeah.
Let me write that down.
Yeah. Don't
Amazing.
don't
Okay,
forget the
okay.
word.
Man, that's that's a big word in that could literally be anything.
Yeah.
Um,
So what are
so
your initial thoughts? What do you think
well,
of when
initial
you?
thoughts yeah, initial thoughts definitely design, obviously. Not a surprise there. But I think hmm, it'd be interesting to I'm gonna try and find a connection that doesn't have anything to do with design, but as I research, it's gonna end up having to do with design. So that's gonna be the interesting kind of it's like rabbit hole journey that I'm
Yeah.
about to go into.
I mean,
So I'm gonna make an effort to look at attraction outside of the box and not necessarily defaulting to, hey, that looks good versus that doesn't look good,
mhm.
like aesthetics, and find a connection with something outside of that. Yeah,
Okay.
so we'll see. We'll see where Google takes me.
Gotcha. That sounds great. I mean, some initial advice, since I have done this process already.
Yes. Yeah.
I,
What's the
I would
workflow?
definitely, I would definitely say that, for me, starting off with, that one word and kind of a direction that I wanted to go in terms of like learning about how does trigger relate to, you know, marketing automation. Uh, you kind of start in one place, and as you go down that rabbit hole, you sometimes you might be surprised and end up in a completely different place. So my piece of advice would be just go wherever it takes you.
Yeah, go with the flow.
Yeah, exactly. If you stumble upon something that seems really interesting, and it's kind of like breaking to the left a little bit from what you originally were looking for, as long as it's like interesting, just keep following the thread, and you'll end up somewhere amazing.
I'm excited.
Yeah. All right. So next time on Work Association, we'll hear what Miles has to say about attraction. Thanks for joining us. I'm Nick.
I'm Miles.
And this is Work Association. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Work Association. If you like this episode, please subscribe, tell a friend, and give us a rating or review. This show was produced by Max Bangora and hosted by Miles Rojas and Nick Dank. Work Association is brought to you by Suits and Sandals, a brand communications and creative agency that helps companies tell better stories and create better digital experiences. To learn more about Suits and Sandals, go to suits-sandals.com. That's SUITS-SANDALS.com.